evening and welcome to this edition of a Walk Down Memory Lane. I'm your host, Earl Based, and joining me is co-host Dennis Brown. We do have 4 special guests with us this evening: Jay Donowa, Kevin Smith, Terence Armstrong, and Michael Watson. Gentlemen, first of all, good evening. Dennis, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Dennis, I spent a few minutes with these guys before we came on the air, and I think we're in for a very entertaining evening. These guys battled it out at times. I've been long time friends. On and off the track, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of these untold stories, because I know we're going to get to some of those. Right, Jay?
Yes, indeed.
I'm rubbing it in already. Kevin's probably got so many. Look, he'll probably be like this.
Like
this.
Oh man, Mike. What you gonna say now, Jay?
Hey, Jay, there's the one from the horses, or there's the one from running?
Oh man,
that's right. That's a bridal ceremony, man.
Hey, I bet you Kevin can't even find his 9. What you got, about 10? I'm Kevin, about 20 in it.
Hold on, I got a treat for you. Hold on.
Here we go.
Parents, control your mate.
Hey, man, I got no.
I only got one, but that's enough. That's it right there. That was the one right there. Don't worry about all them other things. That's the one right there.
I'm going to start off with Terence, because Terence, obviously, being around these guys growing up, what was your time like with these guys in competition and outside of competition?
Oh man, it was different. It was special. Seriously. Let's start with Mike. I mean, Mike, I kind of looked up to him so much when I was running, specializing in the distance, middle distance events. So, I kind of used him as a guide with training with Jerry Swan and everything like that. So it was something that I always aspired to be, because I wanted to see myself, kind of head towards that. And that elusive a mile record that he had held back in the day was something I always strived for when I wanted to get to college. So, that was pretty much Mike in a nutshell. I kind of saw him as someone I wanted to become in a race sort of, style. Kevin was, just that guy. I saw, when I was growing up, I always wanted to be him as a junior athlete. I saw him, killing everything from the CACs, Cariftas, and everything like that. I just saw him as basically a role model for all of us growing up, even, when I was with Jay. And I just saw myself trying to figure out, how can I do this as a young athlete? I mean, I'm doing all these different sports, various sports, but this guy is just killing it, and watched him grow and carry, and his legacy just continued through the senior ranks. And I always just admired that ability he had to carry it that far in life. And I just wanted to, at least look at it and see what I could do and move with it. So that's the Kevin. And then, my boy Jay, he's basically the guy who got me into running itself. So I don't know. I think can you guys see me?
No,
you can hear you.
There's something happened there.
Oh man, what happened?
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Keep going.
Okay. All right. So my boy Jay is pretty much the fella who got the running, got the fire burning in me. So, he's like, a right-hand man. He's the brother I never had, at that age. So it was something I always admired with Jay. We had a true cool relationship, and our running really just carried hand in hand. What he did, I wanted to do. Same thing. We walked ourselves down the lines together, raced hand in hand, and had fed off each other strategy wise. So he was truly my, right there next to me with everything I was doing. So I just wanted to kind of see what I could do and use him as a guide, because I knew he was very talented as a runner, and I really had to work a lot for what I wanted, because I didn't have that background. So, he kind of kept me honest in my true ability, and it kind of led to tying all three of these guys together to make me who I am today as far as running. I mean, truly indeed. So Jay followed me through the ranks and kept me going. And Young, I didn't do much in the Carifta ranks because I think my career, to be honest, got started late in all aspects. But once it took off, I was pretty happy with how things panned out. Like I said, Jay just took me through. We stayed in contact through college, and everything just went great, man. I just really want to thank all three of these guys, to be honest, and just say, they all had a major part in my running career and where I'm at today, for sure.
Dennis, you want to jump in quick?
Yes, it's a pleasure to have these four legends on tonight. In my mind, these guys are really Bermuda legends of the sport. Is really a great pleasure to have them on, and it's amazing how the relationships tie in to each other. Before I move on to the running career, I just want to say Warwick Sack is well represented here tonight with Kevin, Jay, and Terence, well represented. Another Warwick Sack winner was Tracy Wright. So Warwick Sack have some amazing Bermuda Day Derby champions. Before I get into you guys running, because I know a couple of you played other sports, there was Justin Donovan running down the ring up Somerset. There was Jay Donovan running up and down the ring at Somerset. I also looked in an old magazine, I think it was done by Arthur Bean, and I saw a picture of Terence playing football. I believe it was for Devonshire Coast. So to all of you, real quick, did you play any other sports before you got deep into running? What other sports did you play, real quick?
Well, I guess with me, it's obvious. I'm back to the sport I started with, and that was equestrianism.
Okay.
So that was, I played football, I played cricket, but I didn't excel at those sports because running took precedence from an early age. And I had a coach, Jimmy Copeland, Scottish guy, who kind of dissuaded me from doing other sports. He didn't want me to get hurt. So that was kind of a bummer in my mind. I was a little angry at the idea of not being able to play more of team sports. But, it panned out in the end. Of course, it didn't take me long after winning the first cross country in primary school to realize that maybe doing an individual sport wasn't a bad idea. So, So that's pretty much it for me in terms of doing other sports.
Kevin?
Earl, I think Mike was probably, he had this title of being a number 11 batsman in cricket, but wasn't a bowler. So,
There you go.
Oh, wow.
that would have quickly pushed him out.
But in all seriousness, but seriously, it's funny you should say that, Jay, but in all seriousness, the only one thing I could do in the cricket field was bowl. Batting was a problem for me. I didn't like the idea. I always thought that maybe the bowler is thinking like I'm thinking, because I wanted to take you and the bat, when I bowled. That's funny you should say that.
Kevin?
Oh, yeah, I used to dibble around with a little soccer up there with the Eagles. Actually wanted to pursue soccer, but my dad had other plans. Like Mike, once I got into a little running, I was sort that out by mistake. Actually playing a little soccer up there on the golf course, or the boys kicking a little ball up there at Spring Bania, and just found myself following two passerby runners, just took off and followed them and ran all around Port Golf Course, and they couldn't believe how I was hanging in with them. And they've been here until my dad told the gym teacher had something to leave school back then. Now out in Taka, and then he just tried to get me to running, and I went to do soccer, and I wanted to do soccer, and Dad was taking me up National Stadium and trying to force me to run, and I didn't want to run, and And like, once I got a little taste of victory, then, I just kind of leaned more towards the running, and I guess the rest is what they would say was history,
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Terrence?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of dabbled in pretty much all the sports. I played rugby, cricket, football, so it was pretty much a fair amount of sports that I got involved in until I truly loved the cricket and the football. We over at Whitney, we kind of, took over and beat up on those Warwick Sack guys out there.
No.
Can't believe it. Can't believe that.
No. That might have been in double Dutch, but not in double Dutch.
Yeah, so that was pretty much my start, just to see what was up. And like I said, it all came hand in hand once I met up with my mate over there.
Yeah. In high school, funny thing about high school was, at least the high school I went, St. George's Secondary, we really excelled in the cross country area. We were, us and Robert Crawford went at it in the cross country. So I guess it was natural for me once I hit high school to say, well, definitely it's going to be running. Whereas in primary school would have been the time when I kind of messed around with other things. So yeah, it's interesting. But for me, St. George's Sac, we used to win the cross country. Well, you guys know Mark Perry. Well, when Mark Perry won the junior cross country, and our junior team, I can't remember all the other runners, won the junior team trophy. Then it was Richie Fogo, who's a cousin of mine. He won the intermediate, and the guys he was running with, they won the intermediate. So me, Llewellyn Furbert, and Sherman Hill, and a few other guys, we won the senior title in cross country. So we have a real reputation for distance running at St. George's Sac. So that's why I ended up saying, well, I better kiss anything else goodbye when it comes to sports. Yep.
You was 22 when you was at St. George's Sac, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why you was winning. You was running against this little 14-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was 22, I was at the Olympics.
Yeah. Okay. Duly noted. Yeah.
I'm throwing stands now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I see that. Boulders.
Jay, tell them about your football, cricket exploits before you got into running.
Right. So like most kids and the rest of the guys, for me, cricket has always been my first love. But cricket is the sport I played the least in terms of in a formal sort of capacity, like in team. But that is my first love. And Dennis will tell you, I dabbled in football. I was able to run down the right wing and cross the ball over, and that type of thing like that. And then Jerry Swan would talk to me about the idea of just concentrating specifically on running. And one of the things he was they talked about was the injury factor of being in football, and then not realizing that I probably had more injuries in track and field and running, with stress fractures and all of that. I was like, actually, I should have just took my chances in football. I probably would have had a little something and then missed a couple months and been out, because I've had my share of injuries, not injury plague, but I've had a couple minor surgeries in my foot, in both feet, and different things like that. But yeah, but for me, the cricket was what I really loved the most, and still. And I spent a lot of time with my dad, being cricket, and with Somerset and Willicots, and then my Uncle Joe, who obviously was with Somerset, and then Somerset's cup match captain. So even for me, being like the water boy for Somerset in 79 and 80 and 81 and 82, and I know Earl's there. Just looking at those years, I called out 79, 81, 82. There's a year Somerset won, and they were historic years too, because 81, my Uncle Joe was the captain, and it was the first time that Somerset had won cup match in St. George's, and it wasn't until I don't know, 2015 or something like that, when Jacon Edness as the skipper won. It was a long period between that. But I was on the bag then as the water boy. So I told Terence and them guys in another, and I think when we was Hall of Famers for the Pacers, that I was putting Gatorade in the thing before Gatorade was even popular. I was the guy. I was the best water boy out there, it's like that there. But yeah, cricket for me was it. And then I played, and then naturally, but running was something that just, I think, like most of these guys would say, it was the most natural thing for me. And while I was in school, everybody did the sprints and the jumps, and especially the horizontal or the vertical jumps, and I couldn't really do that. And then Cal Simons came to West End and introduced cross country up Scotts Hill, down Scotts Hill, and that's when I said, "Oh, okay, I'm found something here. I can't sprint with these guys, I can't jump with them, but I could definitely have the endurance." And then that's how it kind of started with Cal Simons, and then he introduced me to some of the Pro Shop junior races, and then it just started, and then it started from there. And that's when I shortly met Terence not too long after that. But Kevin was somebody that, I knew, for the years above me. So I was looking up to Kevin, and then Mike was well established in his career and everything like that. So, just, to have these guys, they've all had an integral part in my career, in more ways than one. So yeah, Mike, Mike's the one that Terence talks the least. Mike talks the most.
Oh, we know that. We know that, Jay.
Yeah, Kevin's in between. Kevin's in between. So I have to take all three of them.
Kevin could talk too.
Yeah, and make a nice fish sandwich out of them, Earl and Dennis. Yeah, like that. Mike's the hot pepper.
Yeah, question for all you guys.
Terence, take some of it off, and then Kevin will give you a little bit of everything in between. So yeah, that's
a question for all you guys. Question for everyone.
1 second, Dennis. I'm going to take a commercial break. When we come back, you can ask the question.
Okay, all right.
Our old friends Arrowhead Mills was founded in the 1960s in the famous Texas Panhandle with the ambition to promote the production and use of pesticide-free grains, cereals, and pulses. The mission was to bring the most wholesome food attainable to the mainstream markets. Since then, Arrowhead Mills has increased its range of products, most of which are certified organic. You can be sure that Arrowhead Mills know a thing or two about good eats. This month, we're featuring Arrowhead Mills green and red organic lentils. Lindo's, why go anyplace else?
My inspiration to write this book has to do with empowering. I want people to understand what it looks like when you are in a position when you don't have the tools around you. If you know me or don't know me, the game, the beautiful game of football, soccer, is and always was a way out. I'm still fearful on what to do, what would happen if I say something.
What can we do in this book to incorporate tools to help specifically our group of young people in Bermuda?
Could you imagine doing a read with little people and breaking everything down for them and having them to have a voice and having conversation pieces, if it's chapter by chapter?
welcome back. Dennis?
Yeah, question to everybody again. So all of you talked about guys who had influences on you getting into running. I can remember clearly because I used to work with Kevin's father in the prison. And his father used to brag so much about this Kevin who's coming through. Watch out for Kevin. Kevin's going to be a champion of Bermuda. So who were you guys' biggest influences to really get you into distance running? And so it's two parts to the question. Who are your biggest influences, and how significant was track and field to you guys' development in distance running and cross country? So your biggest influences and how significant was track and field?
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate for me to start first on this one, mainly because
you got 2 minutes, Mike.
Yeah, I was really the first guy that came out of, well, that was involved in running before these guys, because I came out of the segregated era. And I really was the first real middle distance athlete that this country ever knew, especially in track and field. Because before me, things were segregated. And Randy Benjamin, of course, him and a group which involved Earl Hart and Jerry Swan was a young athlete involved, and various other officials. They started the Bermuda Track and Field Association, and then along came Carifta Games, and of course, before me in middle distance, there was a few guys, but nobody really excelled in terms of winning medals before me. So I have won 2 silvers and then 2 bronzes, 2 golds in Carifta. And at that time, it was just me. I had run Bermuda rackets from the 800 up to the half marathon. And of course, I became a big deal because of that, because before me, there wasn't really no, accurate racket set or held. And as a result, I really set the standard when it came to athletes having to be able to run certain times and win certain medals, get an athletic scholarship. So at that time, the only people I really looked up to, because none existed in Bermuda, were really the world record holders like Juan Torino, who happened to be racing against me as a junior in the region in 800 meters. And that's the type of runner I was around. I never really had much of a junior career other than Carifta, because the main competition I had were outside of Bermuda. There was really nobody. Maybe Gary Wilkinson was one of the guys that mentored me, but remember, I was a junior better than these guys. So really my mentors were guys outside of her, one being the world record holder, Alberto Monterina in the 800, who had won the Montreal's 76 Olympic 800 and 400. And then I had Seymour Newman from Jamaica, who had run 145 too, who was and still is, I think, one of the fastest runners we've seen in the Caribbean at 800. So at that time, the Western Hemisphere had some of the top middle distance runners in the world. And these were the guys I basically, was fortunate enough to be able to compete with at CAC and Pan Am level, even as a junior. And so I think it was only natural after me that the Kevins would come along, the Terences and the Jazz, because now there was a standard. I had run sub 150 for 800, sub 340, sub 350 for 1500, sub 15 for 5,000. And, whilst all these records eventually got broken, at least it was a standard. And remembering most of my races were done on grass and dirt tracks. I didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't run on the rubberized tracks we see today. So I always said a lot of my times could have been a lot quicker. But either way, these guys came along and did a fantastic job. Kevin, I remember Kevin, man, as a youngster coming along, and to me, he was like a little machine. He impressed me more than what I thought about myself as a junior runner, and so did Terence Luck. Terence, of course, as he said, he was training with Jerry, and I was assisting and coaching him a little bit, and also being a mentor as an athlete myself. And Jay, of course, with Paces and all these guys, I knew they were coming behind me, and in my mind, well, I've set the standard, but these guys have the capability of being a lot better than me. And whether they be it or not in some areas, at least the standard was set. So that's my say on who was my mentors and who I looked up. And they were really guys outside of Bermuda, to be honest with you.
Kevin?
Yes, that's definitely might just trigger a memory thinking about the old National Stadium. Up there running on that egg-shaped track, one long band, one short band, and just looking back, same scenario as Mike growing up with Peter Lieber, Jeff Payne, Mike, and just a whole host of these guys that, a lot of them are past, God bless their souls, but chasing these guys was definitely a mark, I never forget your highlight because Mike used to walk away for a lot of trips, Remember this bike that used to give you a trip away. Finally hit the mark and no more trips. No more trips. Everything switched up, went to draw prizes. So, but just thinking about how we guys used to train up there on that grass track, and the times we used to turn out was, it was a good advantage for us in Bermuda because when we traveled and got on the rubberized track, we really showed off a lot of our stuff. But those days were back then. They were different. They were fun. You think of Clive Long being a major influence on so many people's careers for scholarships and, the whole building of the track. I could think of many times when we traveled, we got to live in better accommodations just because of who Clive Long was and his passion for the sport and what it done for Bermuda, But otherwise than that, it's just been hysterical to think back. I'm 55 now. And, to think we're talking about it and reminiscing already, it's wow.
Yep.
I remember one time, Mike, when was he? The sportsman at his time, I forgot his name, just left my mind, but he made a statement that said, your running it's just a fleeting moment, and it caused quite a ruckus in Bermuda. But when you think back on it, how time has been fleeting and quick, It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Jay?
Yeah, for me, I think I alluded to it earlier. Obviously, Cal Simons, when he came to West End, he was basically, I have to give him, all the praise in regards to he introduced running to me, distance running to me, to the whole school coming back from when he came back from college. So I'm totally indebted to him. Maybe I might have picked it up, but Cal definitely gave me gave me that sort of footprint, and then through the Pacers program. And then I think Terence and I, because of our age difference, Terence and I share the same birthday, about a year apart. Terence is a year older than me, so I know he looks younger than me, but I'm gonna give him a compliment. He looks, he's a year older than me. But just coming through the Pacers program, and then Kevin, and like Brian Wellman, Devon Bean, who was a little bit younger than us, and all of us, were coming through, through the Pacers, going to the East Coast Invitational, and Kevin's dad was one of the presidents, was a president of the club, in the earlier years like that. But that whole period, from say 83 to 89, was probably the most integral part of my career, and is why I was able to sort of sustain myself through the 90s and the 2000s, and then even into the 2010s, like that. And then when I look at myself in this group here, at one point I was the youngest, and now, and Kevin said his, 55, I go 50 in October, and like I'm old to these to Dej Miners and Lamont Marshall and all of these. I'm an old man to them. But at one point, I was those guys too, like Mike Watson, like that. Not so much Kevin, because Kevin's 4 or 5 years older than me, but Mike and I go on like CAC trips, like cross country. Mike being the elder statesman, and I'm the youngest with him, Kevin, Tracy Wright, Jamal Hart, and all of them. And then it's young Jay Donald, and now I'm 50. So like Kevin said, or almost 50. I'm not gonna claim it yet, but but like Kevin said, it's just I can't believe how time has gone on. But for me, it started in '83. And I ran competitively up to 2017. Then after that, I put the Adidas down, and for about a year or two, then I picked them back up. But nothing. I'm not doing too much anymore like that. Just running for fitness now. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long we got here, but yeah, I could give you a whole story, man. It honestly. I think about 86, 87 is when things kind of took off for me. When I really defined myself as making running my number one sport. Kind of comes hand in hand with Jay, as we spoke about earlier. And at that time, like I said, I kind of looked up to both Mike and Kevin at the time, looking at what they had done for the sport in Bermuda itself. And in time that I was in Bermuda, kind of, as Jay said, I'm kind of a quiet guy, so it was perfect for me in my time to move on and trying to reach out to the U.S. to see what options I had to get out at an earlier age than the normal kids in Bermuda. So I had options with family in the U.S. and it kind of gave me a way out to kind of have more ability to reach out to colleges and be local. So it worked out. To its advantages, where I got into a high school in the U.S. And then went into college and kind of took off. But most of the time, like I said, I kind of go back to, Mike Watson was something I wanted. He had things that I wanted to obtain. And when I was with Jerry Swan, I'd come home for the summers and train with them and watch everything and try to jump in some workouts with Mike and just looking and trying to learn from everything he had. Was a big step for me, and just seeing, and I'll never forget, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here to I'll never forget when I first got his record in the 1500. I like fell to the track, and my first call was home to my parents, and I could not believe it. And it was just something that I had always strived for. He set a limit and a boundary. And like you said, most of his times were done on grass, and who knows what he would have done had he had the, I guess, things that we have now and capabilities. And look at what these kids have now that we didn't have. I mean, I'm looking to pass the torch to my son eventually and hope that he can surpass what I've done. And, and segueing into Kevin, the same thing, man. I just looked at all of those things he did as a junior, and I was like, wow, I have an opportunity to come back home from high school and college and jump in these CAC meets and try to, put Bermuda on the map and do what Kevin and Jay and Mike did, in a sense. But, I still look at all the things I did. I got a silver. I think I got a gold as a CAC junior. CAC was kind of my thing. I got to represent Bermuda in the Pan Am Games. Never made it to the Olympic stage, unfortunately. But it was definitely a big thing, and I owe it to these three guys, man. Jay, like I said, Jay kept the fire burning and kind of got me to a point where I needed to get out of Bermuda to find more talent to race against, in a sense, because it was just him and I most of the time. And not to put Bermuda down as far as runners, but at that time it was just not as much caliber as you would see when you go to a high school meet in the U.S. So a lot of things strived from Jay and I, and it kind of pushed me to that next level and helped me get and obtain the goals and things that Kevin and Mike had. And I'm glad to be where I'm at right now. And I look back and I wouldn't change a thing about it, man, for sure.
We're going to take another commercial break, but the question coming out of the break would be, take us through a training regimen that you had as a young man coming up through the ranks and as you got into your sport. We'll be right back.
Amy Amy's Kitchen is an independent organic food company, a family business who've been producing wholesome and flavorful foods over 30 years. From their first pot pie right up to 1 million meals a day, and firmly believe in the importance of TLC throughout the entire process. This month we're featuring a range of Amy's organic beans, refried and baked, chilies, medium, spicy and beyond, and a multitude of organic soups, minestrone, chunky tomato bisque, cream of mushroom, hearty Thai coconut, and much more. Lindo's, why anyplace else?
My inspiration to write this book has to do with empowering. I want people to understand what it looks like when you are in a position when you don't have the tools around you. If you know me or don't know me, the game, the beautiful game of football, soccer, is and always was a way out. Still fearful on what to do, what would happen if I say something.
What can we do in this book to incorporate tools to help specifically our group of young people in Bermuda?
Could you imagine doing a read with little people and breaking everything down for them and having them to have a voice and having conversation pieces, if it's chapter by chapter?
Putting down the weapons.
You seeing this?
No.
Welcome back. Hey, take us through a training regimen as a young man getting in the sport. Did you hear me, Jay?
Oh, say that again.
Take us through your training regimen as a young man getting into the sport. What was the training session like for you?
Okay, I mean, when I was a junior athlete, as I look back, I mean, obviously, I think now, hindsight is always 20/20. I think a lot of it was I was just sort of learning, about the sport. But for me, it was so natural. So so even though I was probably, if I look back, I was probably doing things that were probably counterproductive in terms of my style and everything like that. But I did more track workouts because that's what we did at that time. The track had just been built up at the stadium, or even prior to that. And Kevin alluded to it. They had like in the backside where the hockey field is now, they had like a 200-meter grass track. And I remember going up there. And obviously coming from Somerset, West End, and then also from Warwick Sac, it was a bit of a chore to have to come up to Prospect to train. But coming up there, we used to do like the 200 meter, 400, 800 meter repeats and all of that. But I would say for me, in the early years, like from 11, 12 to about 14 or 15, it was just I was just running off a sort of more of a natural ability as opposed to like a solidified training program, if you will. And then it wasn't until I got about 15 or 16 that I started to have something a little bit more organized, and then it became, and I was learning my body as well. So kind of like I trained specifically with Terence and with Kevin, and the both of them. While one thing I did learn from the two of them, they incredibly committed, to training, but their training styles and their running styles were a lot different from my running style. So some of the things that they did, while was really great for them, I knew that some of the things wasn't, it wasn't the best thing for Jay. So, so we trained, so I trained with both of them. Not so much with Mike, just because of, the difference in terms of, where we were in our careers like that. So, but for me, the key thing, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I had to learn what was best for Jay in terms of like the running. Now, Terence and I did a lot of workouts together, and some of the workouts was like, because of his middle distance prowess and all of that, there's some of the workouts I just couldn't, like maintain the sort of speed, especially, when I'm talking about like post college and all of that there, because he was gearing towards like the mile. But then, I was doing the longer distance. And then I got to a point where Kevin and I started to train. And then because I knew my body well, and I knew, okay, well, Kevin's going to do 10, I'll just do 8, because I knew that, that's what my body could, handle. And, like that. So it was just, for me, it was just kind of like learning what was best. But I went through, Jerry and with Cal Simons first, and then with Jerry Swan. Once I went up there with him, he was the one that really introduced me to like interval training. So I remember going up there and, you're getting off the bus and stopping down the what's the bakery, Kevin, Curly and Bakery, and you're eating little appetizers, and then you get up to the stadium, and then Jared's like, okay, we're gonna do 60 and 200s today, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, and then you're running, and then about the 8th or 9th one, you got a stitch or whatever, but you can't let him know that you ate apple tarts or whatever like that. So it's kind of, it was trial and error. So for me, so Jay, in my early years versus like once I got to high school in New Jersey and then college and all that, I was a total different in terms of like how I did my like my training regimen. So different, but nonetheless, it worked for me anyway. Yeah.
Terence, what about you?
Yeah. I guess kind of very similar to Jay, as he had mentioned. A lot of stuff for me. I wasn't a big distance guy. I tried it a lot in the beginning. Found a lot of injuries, kind of hit me with. So kind of stepped back. I was really more of a more track workout type things, more, things that were more effective for me as a middle distance runner. Kind of even helped me with the distance. Never really liked it. Always said I would never run a marathon. Finally ended up doing one, but it was just mostly just running off about 60 miles a week. Just getting one solid progression in for the week, a couple of different distance runs to recover. And, you kind of add a little speed work in between. And it kind of goes hand in hand with as you grow older too. You kind of formulate the same type of plan that you want to hit 7 days a week, and then you have different phases. And I'm kind of getting back into it now. I kind of enjoy running again, and it's found its new love and back in me. So I'm trying to figure out what works for me as a younger, and I'm only capable of running 40 miles a week now, but it works out for me. So that's it.
Kevin?
Yeah, I just definitely remember that, Jay, catching the bus all the way from up White Hill, getting up at Crow Lane, and then have to walk up to National. So at a young age, we definitely were instilled with had to have a desire. Just definitely built that discipline. After school, I got to give my kudos to my dad, because he'll pick me up and get me there. He was so dedicated and committed to it. But getting up nationals, training with all the senior boys, because, as Mike said, at a young age, I was running, 14 I was running 156. So I trained with the big boys, the Bill Wiley, and just being dragged around this track. And just, I can remember many times, up there with Clive Long, guys doing 8 sets of 400s off of maybe, 60 seconds and whatever you got for rest, and just, variable things. And my dad would have me up there, he'd cycle with me, and I'll run up towards Somerset until he says, well, I can't keep up with you anymore. And I remember one occasion he reached out to Mike, and Mike came up and, said, look, I can't keep up with young Kevin no more. So, let's move up to another level. But definitely along the way, just building. And as Terence said, injuries strike you for different reasons, and your body functions different ways, and you got to do different things. And it's such a trial and error sport. And, you try to get help from different people and you just play it. You give your desires what you want. So I tended to like to put in a lot of distance, a lot of time and just, really stress myself and push myself. And as Jay said, lots of stuff we done was probably counterproductive, but, we were good at it, we go for it. And then moved up to a point where, you start looking at that elusive title for that May 24th race, Got to get the elusive title. So, once, I moved out from track with different injuries, I had to get up to track earlier because, as Jay said, my body didn't respond well to how I twitched stuff, different just issues that, you're born with. So, I had to move on. So I moved on to the slower running, per se, and just try to implement that with distance and see what comes with it, And fortunately enough, was able to hit that 13-mile distance. Managed to get on the 30 for the 10K up in England on one occasion. But, May 24th obviously is what I'm pretty much branded for, whether it was intentional or not, just being able to sustain and being in the right era had a lot to do with it. So that's why it was kind of important to me to put on a time, so that people don't come back and say, if you're running with this guy or that guy. So that was probably one of my biggest chases, make sure I outdone Mike's time, make sure I run a time that's going to be something that Jay's got to run for and Terence got to run for. So not just that victory. For me, it was let's set a time to, show. So that was probably my goals, and chasing these guys. As I said, I grew up in the era with, as I said, Peter Lieber and Jeff Payne. Those are the guys I raced with, as a younger. So as Mike was, I was amongst the big guys, but that's what made us who we are. We always chasing that person in front of us. They were our carrots.
Mike?
Yeah, well, one of the things we all get introduced to when we start running is, especially as a distance runner, you got the track work, you got the mileage base, and you do have to do some weights training and even some circuit training. So this, generally speaking, is how or what you learn as a distance runner. And again, because in my time, it was kind of like I was the guy being made by Clive Long with the assistance or looking up to some degree at Gary Wilkerson. I only remember Gary Wilkerson being the one older guy. But again, because I was running faster times than him, really I looked overseas other than the actual coach. So, I was introduced to how to do my mileage and how to do the interval training. But I was really a learned soldier to a large degree. Although I had other guys training with me, Clarkson Trott, Mike Swan, Trevor Can, and, too numerous to mention, up there actually training. I was so far ahead of those guys that it was really up to me to test myself. But in general, you do the mileage, you do the intervals. So other than Clive Long and Jeff Payne and Gary Wilkerson, I guess really I was taking a lot of advice from some of the world-class guys that I was competing against, Joaquim Cruz from Brazil. And I kind of took advantage every time I went to CAC or Pan Am, eventually the Olympics, to learn from those guys as to what I should actually be doing. Of course, going to university really helped. I think Jay and Terence can allude to that. And Kevin, because I know, Kevin, you spent a brief time, that once you go university, it's kind of like you get the opportunity to be, if not pro, semi-pro. And so your whole regimen and your lifestyle becomes running, other than getting your studies done. Really, you train more like a professional athlete. You have time to involve your whole day in training in terms of getting up, do your mileage, go to the gym. That afternoon, do your interval training. And specific days of the week, you may have specific things like 20 times 200, or as the season, reaches its end, you end up maybe doing 8 200s, but a lot faster. So So, that's, I think in general, my training wasn't unique. It may have carried on, especially once these guys were introduced to Long or Jerry Swan. It kind of carried on because those coaches were doing not much different from what I was doing, to be honest with you. I know Terence had went over and trained with Nike Farm for a period of time. I think that would have made a big difference for Terence, because here you are with a group of elite guys in a training environment with world-class coaches, other than the coaches that you dealt with in university. So I always say now, as a certified level 3 IF coach, specializing in distance, I always say, God, if I would have known what I knew now back then I think I would have been a much better athlete and runner. But I think we all can look back and say that based on our knowledge now as opposed to then. So that would be what I would have to say about our training regimens in a whole. It's more universal today, you guys, when it comes to the way you train. But it hasn't changed much from the interval specific training, which is, as Jay alluded to, it may become specific to each individual, but basically you're doing the speed work, you're doing the mileage, and you're doing the strength work in the way of a gym or circuit training. Yeah.
Yes, a question for Kevin. 9-time winner. Whoa. 93, 95, 96, 97, 99, 2000, 2001, 02, 03. Why were you so consistent? And what were your most challenging victories out of the 9 and most satisfying?
That's a hard one. Why was I was consistently doing what I done. I always trained with a mindset that my competitor was always just a tad bit too close. That was my mindset. Everyone behind me was just a tad bit too close. They can take me at any time. You never figured the race was mine. It was, I could be beat on that day. So you just put that mindset, I got to do what I got to do. And it just create a atmosphere within myself that I just got to be tough. If you want this, you got to go take it. It's not as my boys would say, it's not a free lunch. You got to go out there and take it. So I just built in my mind that on that day, I'm going to do what I got to do. They take nothing for granted, create an attitude that will present something to your competitors that you have confidence in spite of the inside of your heart's doing 100. You create something that you can project at your competitor. That's, we all know that's what it's all about. It's a competition. You got to play a little mind games and you go out there and you go for it. And of course, a lot of it, like, I told Jay, it's not a time, and it happened with Harley Gibby Selassie and his competitor at the time, Paul Target, And Harley Gibby Selassie made the statement, says, if I wasn't born in this era, then Paul Target would have been the guy. So like for Jay was just born in an era where I was just there. Yeah. So, and I was born in an era, it seemed like Mike was on his way out, I was coming in. So I felt in a good spot, but that generally seems to be how I roll. So just to reiterate, that's why for me, it was about leaning on the times. So my consistency was based around hitting certain times. I remember one occasion, when you talk about the most satisfying one, was probably when I remember I made a bold statement one year to the media that I'm going for the racket. I made it clear that I may not win the race, but I will run faster than, I believe it was Tony Ryan's time at the time, which was 1:11:21, I believe it was. So I broke the racket by not too much. And Mike Sharp, go up as a soul, Mike Sharp says, you're not excited. I said, because, what I had trained and pictured in my mind was in that time. So it was actually the following year when I did the 109 that I was excited about. So that year was a great victory. The highlight above that, I would say, or close to that, was when Mike and Jay took it out. That year I had got sick. I had been out for a while. So we came into the race, and that's when I was able to reel Jay and Mike in on Burnt House Hill. You remember that race, Mike? You know, that one was quite satisfying.
Jay should remember, because I was an old man and I got crossing.
Oh man, so, that year was significant to be able to, to be off and then see my body still be able to respond and be able to still take the victory, But it was definitely fun, when we were able to. I would say one of my biggest disappointment was that I had, it was kind of like, that era I was in. Most of my victories, I was in a kind of a learn run, and my times were so far ahead, and that was, it had to create so much atmosphere to make it happen, as far as, because people would tell me straight up, look, why don't you let somebody else win, Come on, man. It's tired of seeing you always win, let somebody else come down. So it was exciting when Terence and Jay, the three of us came down, it'd be hustle and bustle. It just created another atmosphere, It was fun. It was more pleasing to the public. So but having 9 victors, the key, they all were quite satisfying because the work that went into it, I was a very hard trainer, I put a lot of time in it. I sacrificed, quite a bit, even in the party days, when we used to hang out, I still did my training. Yeah. Never miss a beat. You do what you got to do, and you show up through hard times, AJ, and some hard times.
Yeah.
And you show up and you do what you got to do. And so apart from that, the running was, for all of us, it builds such characters in us. It teaches us it taught us to stand firm. It allows me, I look at Jay and Terence in particular, these family men, these young family men, these guys have done an awesome job, and I'm sure a lot of it they can, attach to the development of what it came of having to fight themselves. Running just about victory and getting that prize, it's bigger than that, because everybody, runs. And I glory in so many people that out there for an hour and 2 hours, 2 hours and 50 minutes, and are pressing, For me, to them, to see them press on, I constantly tell people, no, that's your best. That's your 100%. It's no different from my 100%. It's just that the position has to be what it's all about. But the whole picture of running and being part of it and all different facets, it's just been, like you say, looking back from this perspective, I thought about this day. One day I'm going to be talking about it. And, here it is. So,
yeah.
I would say, apart from the May 24th, the most highlight of my hill running career was my trip to Jamaica on my first Crifter Games. And that's when I broke the Crifter record in the 800, running the 156, broke the 1500 meter runner during the 406. That was the highlight because I left Bermuda with such optimism. I was telling my dad that I'm not going down there just to win. I'm going down there to break some records. And, I'll never forget, my dad went to Clive Long and said, Clive, talk to Kevin. He's getting blue himself. And getting there and couldn't sleep that night. I remember I was up talking to Candy Ford and went out there on that track, tears in my eyes. I was kind of short back then. You remember that, Mike? I was kind of a short fella.
Yeah.
Track with these big boys.
Yeah.
And played it out. So that would never leave me. I remember coming back from Bermuda. I did it, so that record stood for a good 15 years or so, running that time at 14 years old was pretty decent. So that was probably the highlight, rather be on track or the road. That was definitely the highlight of my hill running career.
Mike, 4-time winner. What were your strategies going into most races? 84, 85, 87, 91 when you won. What were your strategies going into those races?
Well, I guess my course when it came to May 24th was much different than most people when it came to May 24th, because really I had to be persuaded to run May 24th because my focus was middle distance. When you're trying to be a world-class 800-meter runner and you run 1,500 at the longest, which was very similar to Terence. Terence probably could relate to this. May 24th simply wasn't in the cards to begin with. So it wasn't until my grandfather really sat me down and told me the importance and the historical aspect of the event that I said, well, let me try it and see what happens. Then I kind of worked it into my running program, whereby May 24th became a part of my training more than my actual event. So admittedly, I never specifically trained for May 24th so much as I ran the race. And of course, you guys would laugh because, especially the last race, Terence, I ended up in the hospital because, I never really put in the sufficient mileage needed to be running a half marathon. But I had a lot of guts and I was determined. And I always had this attitude that if I could run against world-class guys on the track, certainly running May 24th, where I didn't feel like we really had people that were really, I guess, true long distance specialists in Bermuda. So I always felt, well, I stand a chance because even though I don't specifically train for this event, looking at my competition, I could still pull it off. So lucky for me, when I ran it, I managed to pull it off. But a lot of times I didn't have a real strategy other than I just figured I'd wear everybody out by going out hard. And I think Terence learned that lesson. I went out hard and I could sustain it, where a lot of people, especially coming from middle distance background like me, couldn't do that. They couldn't get out hard and sustain it. Real distance runners like Kevin and Jay, I think you run strong at the end. But I wasn't especially good at that. I think it's only one time I ran it and I really was strong at the end. And that's only because it wasn't an Olympic year or a Pan Am year. And I kind of put a little bit more mileage in. And that was, I think, the second or third time I won it. Can't remember which one. And I had run a 109 too, but it was on a different course. That's the thing about May 24th. They kept switching the course for some reason after they stopped going to the National Stadium. But that's the only time I specifically remember being a little bit ready for that race. So admittedly, I won it 4 times because it's a wonder I won it 4 times actually, because my concentration really was never May 24th as such. I think the only time I kind of was a little bit more mileage based is when Terence came home but I was pretty much getting out of the picture there, and Terence was kind of coming in, and I think at that time, I think the last time I won it in '91, I kind of had the guts to go out hard. I think it was originally Terence's strategy actually, but I kind of fell in here. I fell in his hands because him and his college mate were going out so fast. I said, well, the rhythm is set now. So if these guys are going back down, well, I'm going to keep going. And lucky for me, it paid off, But that's the truth on me. I never really focused solely on May 24th. I was just fortunate to have won it 4 times.
Terence, 3-time winner. How was it for you to be a 3-time winner? And which were your most satisfying victories? And what was the reason for those long sucks?
Yeah, so very much like Mike, I can almost say ditto. Most of my training was based around, the track early in my career. May 24th just became that Bermuda race everyone, said you had to do. Just had to come home 1 year. And, I think I was a sophomore, 91. I was a sophomore in college or going into my junior year. And talking to my college coach, Mike Brady, he was just saying, just go do it. Your season's over. See what you got. You pretty much have everything on reserve. You got nothing to lose. You're peaked. You ran as fast as you can. I think that year I only ran like 3:49 in the 1500. So the season was still young. I mean, the season was over, but my career was still young. He's like, just run off of it. He's like, you got everything still in you. Went home, and that was the year that the guys came home, as Mike mentioned, was 91. A couple things changed up in the race that we didn't expect. And, for me, it was just like, I got to run the race. Unfortunately, I never knew how to run a race of that distance. We'd run runs in training. Our long runs were, 15 miles, for most of the middle distance guys. The distance guys were running longer. But my max was 13 to 15 miles on my long run. So it was just, basically a long, hard run for me. And, I was pretty much happy with it. And then I just said, you know what, I got my feet wet, and I said, let me just get back to what I enjoy doing. And I think it took me until, I guess, a couple years later, probably almost 10 years later, before I decided to come back. And as we mentioned, I kind of moved on to semi-professional running after college, and it was just a matter of just running distance. I kind of retired off of the track and just said, let's see what I can do. Everyone that I had run with when I moved back here to New Jersey had said, you know what, why don't you just go home and jump back in it? You and Jay is still competing and talking. And, I kept, Jay and I kept in contact. We were trading workout secrets back and forth, kind of figuring out what can work with our training. And just said, let's just jump in it. And that was, I think 2004 was when I really, really said, okay, I think I finally feel fit enough to jump in this race. I mean, there was another race before that, but unfortunately I can't recall exactly how it panned out. Obviously, I don't think I ran very well. I think actually Jay and I went out, and that was a race where Kevin had passed us halfway through, so to speak. But the most memorable race for me was definitely 2004, where I think we kind of gave the Bermuda crowd something for them to watch and enjoy. With the three of us, pretty much running neck and neck all the way through, I would say 98% of the race. And it was just one of those races where I think each one of us took turns pushing the pace, letting the other lead, figuring out who was going to take the lead. No one, really could make that decisive move, because every time a move was made, we all countered. And it was just one of those, as far as I remember. And then I was like, okay. And I kept saying to myself, I'm like, I'm still in this race, and I still got my 1,500 meter speed in my legs. And I mean, hadn't really experienced the cramping as much at the time, and just figured it was, a good race. I was feeling good. The crowd was behind everybody, and fortunate enough, I had a little bit more in the tank than these guys had at the end of the race, and got my first victory. And that's probably my most memorable victory. And I believe, as you mentioned, I had the socks on. The socks were more of a preventive cramping and recovery stance. They're compression socks. I still wear them to this day. They really call them old people socks. They help with circulation of the blood in the legs and things like that, and help for recovery. So most people do them when they know they're going to do hard workouts to help them recover for the next day. So for me, it was more of just getting everything I could out of my legs, and knowing that I wasn't going to cramp up, and try to reserve as much as I could in my body without pushing it out of its limits. So, it kind of became a fashion trend, I guess, at the time, but it worked for me, and I still run to this day for it. But, I again, the next 2 years races that came hand in hand were kind of like, okay, well, I got one under my belt. It was more of a, I'm comfortable. I know what it takes to win it. I know what it takes to run it, and I can run it from the back, from the front, and I kind of got comfortable and did it. And it was very impressive in my sense for a middle distance runner to feel that comfortable running that distance. And I'll take it for what it was worth. I mean, I was blessed to have the, have the wins, and I'll take them for sure.
And Jay, I would say Jay was probably consistent as well. You know what I mean? Jay was always like in the first three. So that to me tells me that's consistency. 2017. Well, even in the cross country, I think you were a serial winner in the cross country, Jay. But 2017, you finally broke through. How satisfying, gratifying for you was that victory in 2017 as a 44-year-old? How gratifying was that for you to now put your name in history, because your name will always go down in history as a marathon derby winner? How gratifying was that to you in 2017 to finally win the Bermuda Day Marathon?
Yeah, it was gratifying. It wasn't expected. I mean, to sit here and say that, yeah, I was expecting that. I just figured, I had already accepted that, I had put my best foot forward, in the younger years, the years before that, and just the accepting the fact that, wow, I enjoyed a lot of success, for whatever reasons. Well, these guys are some, but Kevin and Terence are probably Kevin's 9 victories, probably about maybe 5 or 6 are probably one of the reasons why I didn't win. And then Terence, I think Terence I didn't run in 2006 because that was probably my fittest year, and I rolled my ankle the day before the race, and that was probably a year that I was definitely going into the race. I'm not saying that I would have won, but that would have been. But yeah, in 17, obviously it was like it was totally unexpected. But to be honest, if I went down there, I wasn't. Obviously, I was older, but I wasn't as fit as I was in previous years. Like that. I was experiencing some problems that I was having, in terms of sickness wise and different things like that, in terms of what they call like exercise induced hematuria, which is basically blood in the urine every time I would, like run hard. So, so for me, it was like, if I ran hard, I would get that. So I would just come off the bubble. So, and I was obviously accepted the fact that I was in my mid 40s. So going down to the race, I just went there and I got dropped off in St. George's, and I went out by RAA Club, and I was putting on my little gear and warmed up out there with the cows and all that. And I said, well, it's just you and I, me and the cows out there. And then I thought to myself, I said, wow, if I don't go to the starting line, how am I going to get back to on, or whatever like that. So I said, well, okay, you must have run to the starting line. Anyway, I got down there and for me, it was just like, the race went off and I just looked around and looked at, who was there. And I just managed the race based on the experience. I had always envisioned, I think Kevin talked about this before, I had always just envisioned winning the race and just like smashing it, like that. And for whatever reason, I just couldn't, put those puzzles, the pieces of the puzzle on that day. And but I had just envisioned coming down Front Street in one of those early years, just, rock hard to the crowd and all of that. But in 17, I was coming down Front Street. Just begging for Dutton Avenue to hurry up and come. And then, it was not the most enjoyable experience. It hurt. That's the most I've hurt, the slowest I've ever run in a half marathon ever. Even as a 16-year-old, I ran faster than that. But I won the race. So, and even afterwards, I felt a little embarrassed. I was like, well, I won, but I was looking at them people saying, look, man, you just won, just accept it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well. So I just took it as a thing where, all the hard work that I had put in, a lot of disappointment, and all of that I had to endure and like that. And it all came together and it was totally, totally unexpected. If I could not say that I left home on 24th of May in 2017 and say, yeah, this is going to be the year. That was far from my mind. And actually, when we got out by Double Dip, I started to experience little problems in my stomach. And then I was like, should I drop out? And then I was like, no, just keep going. And then, and it worked out. So I'm just thankful. And I know you can't ask me which victory was the best. So I'll just screw you that one. I had the chance to say, oh, well, in 05, 06, that was the rocky year. Well, in 95, that was my good year. Mike had his years, and Terence had 17. But honestly, I would say that in 1999, that was Kevin won that year there. And that was the first time I realized I could run the distance, like that. Kevin won, but like for me, it was like, like the other guys, we were never really running for to be, like we wanted to be May 24th champions, but we wasn't training because I was doing cross country and trying to run track and all of that, so I wasn't really like focused like that. But in '99, kind of proved to me that yes, you can you can run this distance here. And then after that, I had some really good times. I ran 110s and all of that in other races like that. And so it kind of gave me the confidence to say, okay, yeah, once you get to mile 10 or whatever in this race, you can press on. So, but it was gratifying. I'm thankful. I wouldn't, looking back, I wouldn't change it. I had to wait a long time. Like I said, I had envisioned, like, when I came out of college, I would just come back and smash the race, multiple times. And it was the one thing that just eluded me forever. And everything else was, I was winning this, winning that, going away with Bermuda. And then this race here was just like, yeah, it was like that little carrot out there. But in 17, I was able to embrace it. And then so I could sit on the stage with Kevin and Mike and Terence, because if I didn't win it, you wouldn't have called me for this interview.
No, I wouldn't have called you tonight.
No, I know that. You'd have to call somebody else.
I'd have called Tracy, my classmate.
Tracy. He'd have been more deserving. He'd have got to ask him about his 2 victories.
That's fine. Y'all Trojan.
Oh yeah, no, I like that, Dennis.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Go ahead, Earl.
I will ask, before I let you ask the last question, what would you consider your biggest disappointment in your time of running? It could have been on the track, it could have been the Bermuda Day, it could have been international. But what would you consider your biggest disappointment personally? And I'll start with you, Mike.
Oh boy, sheesh. Well, I guess we all would want to have one more. My biggest disappointment, I guess, was not taking the opportunity that was afforded to me after placing 4th in the finals to the Liberty Bell Classic for countries that boycotted the 1980 Olympics. Having made that final, run 148.3 in the pouring rain and wind against guys that regularly ran 144 and 143. Beating Peter Lamerson, and who was ranked number 1 in the world that year, and the guy. But anyway, I was invited by Adidas to live and train professionally and live in Europe. And I guess they recognized if I could run with these guys, if I was afforded the opportunity to go pro, to really go pro, then maybe I would fare even a lot better. But I declined, and at that time, remember, guys, it was really, I was the one after segregation. So to me, I always felt like, as a Black man, I better go back home and secure a job. A real job, because this running thing may not work out. It may work out and it may not work out. So I came back home and ended up, being head of the department at the World Gazette and really running a amateur lifestyle in athletics, which I still achieved things. I was happy I made it to the 88 Olympics. Should have made 84. But that's another story, what happened there. But yeah, the most disappointing thing to me was really a choice that I made to go back and live in Bermuda instead of going pro. I often tease my son to this day. I said, man, you better be lucky, but you're around, because I turned on going to Europe, so but I'm glad I made that choice. When I look at him, I'm really happy I made that choice. But that, in all reality, would have probably not so much disappointment as I probably could have been better had I taken that opportunity. Yeah.
Kevin?
Disappointment would be not being able to accomplish the times I wanted to accomplish in most of the distances, from the 10K, from the track really, all the way up to the marathon, because of one issue or the other in my body that would prevent me from being able to push on. and feeling good, but just not able to push on. So that's always plagued me. That's my biggest disappointment altogether.
I don't really I really don't have any like one thing that I would say. I mean, I just look at when I look at my entire like running career, while there have been disappointments, there's nothing that like I just feel totally just satisfied. I feel like I gave the sport, I respected the sport, and I put in as much hard work as I could, and I think I got out of it what I put in, and I really don't have like any one thing that I wish I could have just said, well, I wish I'd have did this or did that. Like I just feel like all the decisions that I made while at the time, they just sort of led to where I am, as a man now. So I'm just thankful for the career, and I just, it's nothing I'm going to sit back and just say, yeah, I could have did this. Yeah, we all want to run faster or did this or made this, but yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I love running, always have, and it's just been, an integral part of who, who I am. I always used to say this here is that running was the extension of my personality, not the definition. So I always just, I didn't define myself by, whether I won this race or did this race. That was just the extension of who I am. So, and all these guys, well, all of you know that, while I was serious as a competitor, I'm a lighthearted joker, like that. That's just who I am. So there's multiple facets, of me. I ain't no picnic to be in a relationship if I know that, but I'm just thankful. I'm just thankful for my career and everything that's come. And I've met some great people on this panel, and forged a lot of relationships over the years. And I wouldn't change anything. I mean, yeah, it just things worked out. So, and I came through a very good era. And so out of those 8 seconds I got, most of them went to Kevin. So while I didn't win, I was losing to somebody that was that dominant, like that. And I told Kevin before, and I will say it, in this forum here, is that, and this is no disrespect to Mike, as a 4-time winner, or Terence, or any of the other winners. Kevin was dominant because Kevin could win the race in many different ways. And that's his legacy for me. It was the fact that he was able to, he could go fast. I remember one year he attacked the hills. One year he attacked it uphill. So I said, all right, well, next year I'm going to work on the uphill. Then the next year he came back and attacked the downhill. Like he won the race in many different ways. And, to me, that's why I have so much respect, like that, because he understood his strengths, but he understood that, okay, the other runners, other competitors, me and Terence and all of that, like he had to figure out different ways to, he could win, but he had to figure out different ways, because if he just ran the same way, we would just say, all right, well, if he goes out hard, we just go with him. And if he runs out of ideas, we'll just stay with him and try to work him and thing. But Kevin had different ways. And I mean, that's what I sort of admired about him the most. He won out of those 9. Well, I wasn't in the race of all 9, but he won them in different ways. Even though he dominated the race, he ran differently. If you understand what I'm saying, a lot, like that. So, but no disappointments. I'm just thankful I came through this era, and it was great. It was great, and and I'm sure they would have said the same thing if I was 9-time winner or something like that.
All right, fine.
Yes, it was time.
Terrence?
Yes. So if I had one major disappointment, for me, the elusive Olympics. That was one thing I had strived for. Pretty much after college, that was what I designed my life for. I put professional life on hold and decided to join the Reebok Enclave and train professionally, semi-professionally, however you want to call it, to try to make that mark to represent Bermuda at the Olympics. And the first year, I believe, the first Olympics I had attended to, I believe I got hurt and fell short. And the second one, I just missed the mark when I actually ran 3:41. I needed to run 3:38. So, you know, if I had to look back on one thing that I had put everything into, all my eggs in one basket, my biggest disappointment would be that, you know, I wish I had had the opportunity to run in an Olympics to represent Bermuda. But other than that, I think I had the best life, and I wouldn't change a thing about it in running.
Sure. Final question, Dennis?
Yes. So I'm pretty well versed in sports and in all sports. To be a champion, you got to beat a champion. How will or can someone defeat Aswanick in the Bermuda Day Marathon? How can and will somebody beat this guy? Because I think his either tied Kevin's record or close to Kevin's record. How will somebody beat this guy? Everybody in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, Mike.
2 minutes, Mike.
Well, I've always said when you're racing a guy in a race that long, one of the things you got to do, the only chance you got when a runner is that dominant, is you can't beat him if you allow him to dominate you. And you got to change his thinking. In order to change his thinking, you got to be with him. And to some degree, and I think Terence, again, can relate to this, because I'm pretty sure Terence was a lot fitter than me the year I beat him in 91. And the reason I always felt I beat him is because I took a chance. And that chance means sometimes you place on a competitor's mind. And one thing I knew, I said, you know, Terence is in the peak of his career, and me, I'm finished mine. I said, but one thing I can do is defeat him mentally by making him think I'm better than I am. And how I did that was I basically committed myself and ran harder than I needed to run at the right time to make Terence think differently. And I think in Aswanick's case, nobody's ever made him think differently. He's always had his way. He goes out hard. And, you know, in all reality, he may not be beaten because it's been that dominant, as Kevin was in his era, as I was in the 4 time I done it. But my thinking is, in order to beat these guys, you got to be brave enough to make us think you're as good as we are, and you got to try a tactic on us that will make us fail mentally, because you're not going to beat us physically. And that's what I feel is the only chance you would have against a guy like Aswanick. But again, you know, hey, you know, he's been that dominant that it's possible he wouldn't be beat anyway. But the only chance you got is to change his mind and try things, whether it's run along with him and just take off, even though you're not ready to. But you better hope you last when you do take off, and you gotta hope he slows down, because mentally he's thinking you're better than he is. So that is my thinking on it.
Yeah, this is sorry, I had technical problems there. So we're discussing how to beat Aswanick, more or less.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly. I think honestly he has the ability. I've seen him as a college athlete. He has the talent. You know, the training that I see him doing, you know, I don't know if anyone in Bermuda really could keep up with that. I think the Marshall would be his best competitor right now. But most of it is going to be just someone who is going to have that background with some extensive distance run a track and more an understanding of how to sustain, you know, a solid 5:15 and 5:20 pace for that distance. But it's really going to be a tough one to look at.
Kevin?
Aswanick, you look at a man's resume, what he brings to the table. Aswanick's a sub 4 minute miler. Aswanick runs Vaid on. He can run a Vaid on low sub 14, if not high 13s. That's one that runs 28, 29 for 10K. So, and so on. So the reality is, we can desire to want to do something, but you just don't have the engine, you don't have it. So, and able to, as Mike said, and able to run with him, you got to be able to run with him. You got to know, you got to have the ability. And if you all have a desire to do things, I mean, I didn't really have a desire to go to the Olympics because I just knew my engine wasn't there. I trained hard, I put it down and looked at it and said no. So the reality is we got to just find someone that's able to do it. I mean, the question's been posed to me multiple times, you can imagine. If he was running and you were running. And I looked at my resume and I believe he may have jostled, but it would have been a race, once he learned me and I would have learned him, but it would obviously brought him to a new level also. But being able to run with someone is, you got to have the engine, and then be able to apply all the tactics that come with it. So that's the facts of it.
Yeah, I'm very similar to Kevin. I just think that first, the runner has to possess the pedigree, but more importantly, I think if you focus singularly on trying to beat somebody, then I think it sort of takes away from you as the athlete. Like you want to be at the best you can be, and then you set a plan. And if the plan is to go out and run the race in a certain way, I think that's how you kind of approach it. And I would say this here, like the year Terence won in, was it 2004? Like I had set the race up that it was like, okay, I'm gonna beat Kevin, and I beat Kevin, but Terence won the race. You see what I'm saying? So so I think you have to like the athlete has to have a focus that they're not going to beat themselves, and they're not going to narrow their thought process to just beating that individual, like that. But I mean, obviously, like the guy said, I mean, his resume is impressive, and it's going to require somebody with a high degree of pedigree, and to be there. But then in that race, they're going to have to run the race in a way that is that's going to suit their style. Because if you're not a front runner or whatever like that, and you try to run from the front, then then the race is going to be over, with you really early. So it's just it's a lot of it is dependent on the individual and how they approach the race. But I think if you just focus on beating somebody, sometimes you might miss the trick. So and I'm just speaking from experience in the race. I mean, Terence and I talked about the race with Kevin, and I was like, yeah. And then he got on Front Street. I was like, yeah. I ain't been on Front Street with Kevin like this. I say, yeah, I'm gonna just grind him out. And then we got on to Reed Street Extension. I say, yeah, he was dropping off. I say, yeah, this is mine. Then Terence put in a surge gun up by the American consulate. And before I could react to it, before I realized what happened, I couldn't react. And that 30 meters just became, the difference. And that's because of the mindset of just trying to, and if you understand what I'm trying to say. But I think, his level is different. Is a different. He comes in with a different, a high degree of pedigree and just amazing resume, and he trains hard. It's not just his that's not here. He's not been in Bermuda just running, just casually like how we, like how I say I get up and run 6 miles every day, but I'm not gonna come down and run 24th of May and smash these. Like he trains hard, and and so he's at a high level, but he also trains at a high level. So if that answers your question, but yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you all very, very much for taking us on this journey back, a walk down memory lane. Dennis,
beautiful.
You think you can? You think back in the day you was able to do 2800s?
Sure.
Okay. And
then Dennis weren't even a long jumper. He was a broad jumper. That's how long he was jumping. They called it the broad jump back then. And Dennis was
I rock a steel stance, 18 feet at 11 years old.
Okay, in the broad jump. In the broad jump.
In the broad jump. That's it.
In the broad jump. Yeah. Hey, you're
good at 11. That's pretty good.
Hey,
And Watson's got
that's right.
Watson's got about 30 rackets at St. George's Sack, you know, that's going to still stand. You know, like,
Yeah.
Mike's got rackets there, the egg and spoon, 800 meters, 600 meters, 700 meters.
Yeah,
St. George's Sack too. The oldest, he is 22 in fifth year.
St. George's boys forever.
Yeah.
It's blue, it is red, right? You know this, right?
You got it.
Enjoy your night.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much. Good night, guys.